Samantha, a heroine from another era. The pitcher goes to the well so often that it breaks down at last. A popular Spanish saying. Be very careful, Sam. Aunt Kitty was having a party at her home and was reluctant to let her go out. Pay attention to the traffic signs and don't get distracted. You know very well that many drivers are drunk and you must stay alert to avoid them. I promise I will, Mom. Samantha was tired of hearing her repeat the same old warnings for the umpteenth time and found it hard to be patient. She knew it was unfair to get angry. It was for her own good. But this constant litany reminded her, every time she went out to have fun, of the sad story of her life, as she had been orphaned when her parents died on the road. They had been murdered by a drunkard who used a tanker truck as a lethal weapon. Moreover, the minivan they were traveling in had caught fire. And in the mortuary urns delivered by the funeral home, the ashes of both parents were mixed with the remains of the leather from the seats and the pieces of metal from the bodywork. That was why she hated the smell of incense, because it was very similar to the smell that had lingered in her nose after she had scattered on the sea what little remained of her parents, as stipulated in their wills. She walked slowly to the old Toyota. Then she sat down calmly. Before starting it, she watched the waves crash against the rocks on the beach. The surf created foam flakes that later perfumed the air with saltpeter. The sound, a mixture of whiplash, thunder, and gurgling, reminded her of the storms in Wuthering Heights, written by Emily Bronte in the mid-19th century, which she reread tirelessly. She was addicted to this bleak book because it reminded her of the fate of her love for Adrian, which had been thwarted from the moment it began. She was distracted by the fact that on the steps leading down to the sand, a pair of seagulls were looking at her, hopeful, since Samantha always brought them some leftovers from lunch. Because of this ravenous attitude, she had named them Glutton and Impatient. "I didn't bring you anything today, girls," she shouted from the window, and they responded with a reproachful look. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that her aunt was still watching her from the 4-story house, smiling condescendingly. Poor Kitty. If she only knew where she was going. She was highly overprotective of her to compensate for her losses and did not realize that this behavior was counterproductive for both. They should support each other instead of suffocating one another. The woman knew the phone numbers and addresses of her friends, the latest news from her job as a library assistant, her romantic disappointments. But despite knowing quite a bit, she was unaware that every day at 5 in the afternoon, she met her soulmate at El Matador State Beach to practice parkour in the rugged areas. It was her way of rebelling against so much overprotection, and she had been practicing it since she was 8 years old and Adrian was 11. Now, at 19, she was an expert. They had the complicity of Mary, his mother, who also acted as Sam's mother. In fact, she fixed everything that Kitty messed up by acting like a skittish hen whose eggs were being stolen. When her aunt left the window and closed it with a sharp click, Samantha murmured with relief, "Finally!" She put the key in the ignition and turned it to the right. But no matter how hard she tried, it didn't work. She focused her eyes on the crystal-clear water, on the curious seagulls, on the morning sun. She breathed in the scent of saltpeter and seaweed, and she sighed in resignation. Sam decided to give the Toyota one last chance. She tried to start it again, but only to find that it seemed the vehicle was just a piece of junk made up of only the chassis without an engine or electrical system. The only positive part was that she had plenty of time. So she searched for her mobile phone in her backpack and found Adrian on speed dial. He took a couple of minutes to answer. What on earth was distracting him? "Did you fall out of bed, squirrel?" The male voice sounded languid. Maybe he was still asleep. "Aren't we meeting at 5 like every day?" "Not today." "Oh, that's right. We changed it to the morning. I forgot. Are you headed there?" "I was, Stretch. I didn't count on the Toyota deciding to die on me just today." She thought she heard a female groan in the background, so she listened carefully. "Okay, I'm on my way to your house." He sounded more awake and less lazy now. "Give me 15 or 20 minutes. I'll drop Karen off somewhere first." "Perfect." Sam pretended to be happy. "I'll wait for you at the entrance to Point Doom State Beach. That way we'll save time, and you won't have to come up here." "Great, I'm on my way," he said cheerfully. She heard his girlfriend scold him with the voice of an evil witch from a children's tale. "Tell that pest not to bother us when we're in bed. And I don't understand either why you have to jump around like monkeys instead of walking like mature people." Sam walked to the meeting point with furious strides that kicked up the dust from the roadside. What does Adrian see in that airhead with only sawdust in her brain? She thought disappointedly. She did not understand why they were still together when they were as different as night and day. Besides, it angered her that they had become a couple just a few days after the incident had occurred, 4 endless years ago. It was true that she had a killer body, she acknowledged reluctantly, although achieved with surgery. If he had chosen her after a reasonable time, maybe she wouldn't protest. Sam knew it was absurd, but she felt like a betrayed wife. She did find it amusing that Karen's breasts were pressed together to an exaggerated degree. Sometimes she imagined that Bimba, Mary's toy poodle puppy, would crawl into her little cleavage to use as a hiding place and get lost in there forever. She did not continue with the vengeful fantasy because there was a possibility she could suffocate. Sam loved animals and went so far as to humanize them. What if an implant fell on the puppy's head and crushed her? She thought gravely. She told herself she would try to keep her away as a precaution. Moreover, they were positioned so high that they almost reached her neck. Perhaps it was due to the plastic surgeon's error that she pecked at her food instead of swallowing it. Since they were extra large, if a Category 6 hurricane tried to sweep her away, she would remain rooted in place, thanks to the 2 anchors she called breasts. Samantha knew them firsthand, because when Adrian's mother was not home, Karen would take the opportunity to sunbathe topless by the pool. Was she trying to traumatize her or make her feel uncomfortable so she would leave them alone? She would never succeed, because she considered Karen the intruder who lounged with a cocktail in hand while the 2 of them practiced parkour as well synchronized as lovers in bed. They planned to win the street competition next month and hoped to have it declared an Olympic sport so that they could represent the United States in the future. Amid these reflections, she reached the crossroads. Then she walked 6 or 7 more steps and leaned against the sign that marked the start of Point Doom State. She took a deep breath and reveled in the sight of the blanket of light, rainbow-colored, that enveloped the distant hills. The nearby sea cliffs sparkled like diamonds, and the yachts disappeared into the horizon, just like her adolescence. She wanted the landscape to distract her attention from Karen and the hatred that overwhelmed her just thinking about her. Or when anyone smelled of the scent of orange blossoms, roses, and jasmine that the busybody usually wore. She should hate Adrian too, because the incident had completely unsettled him, and from that moment on, he acted like a madman. and because he was the one who introduced a third party into the relationship they shared. Perhaps it was inappropriate to focus on Karen when her friend was coming to pick her up. He knew her too well and would assume that she was dying of jealousy, even though it wasn't true. And he would put on the skeptical face that Sam hated. The situation was simple. His busty girlfriend was unpleasant because she acted like an unpleasant person. Even when she greeted her politely, she belittled her and did everything possible to drive them apart. In addition, Adrian did not hide that Karen asked him to end their friendship and that he replied, "Squirrel and I are soulmates. If it bothers you to see us together, you know where the door is." But Karen didn't leave, nor did Adrian kick her out. And Sam's resentment only grew when she heard him use the word soulmates. Because if they were such soulmates, how could they have hooked up? Moreover, they referred to that moment of madness as the incident and avoided talking about it with the same determination that most cats show in avoiding water. Back then, Sam was 15 years old and Adrian was 18. They were alone at his house, as they often were. They were killing time in front of the cinema-sized screen in his bedroom. And they were destroying the karaoke version of Taylor Swift's Blank Space. The funniest part was that they acted out the situations in the video and reversed the roles. Adrian was Taylor and Sam was the handsome guy. They were laughing their heads off as he gesticulated on the bed. Then he would stand up, flutter his eyelashes as if they were heavy falsies, and he would invite her to dance. She would parade around imaginary Dobermans, just like in the video, and pretend to ride a horse. Then she would stare at him, trying to be serious, and she would barely control her laughter. The handsome model did little besides pose. It was Adrian who had to work harder. When the faces on the screen came close together for a kiss, Sam ran to get a chair to compensate for the difference in height, as she was 5.7 and her friend was over 6.3. Meanwhile, they laughed and joked like children. They recreated what they saw on TV by bringing their faces closer, but without touching lips. Adrian suddenly turned serious, and a sparkle lit up his blue eyes. He closed in on the space that separated him from her mouth and kissed her. Sam didn't know what to do. She felt ridiculous perched on top of the chair, with her arms hanging at her sides and her eyelids raised in surprise like a fish out of water. Adrian, on the other hand, had his eyes closed. She knew he was an expert on the subject because he would tell her about his love escapades and they would laugh about it, especially when the girl acted strange or too possessive. She sighed and saw him as a man for the first time, and she acknowledged that she found him very attractive. The kiss was not only pleasurable, but the woody fragrance of the male perfume he used, combined with his body aroma, made her legs tremble. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried away by the feelings that had always occupied a small corner of her heart, even if she didn't realize it. She caressed his dark brown hair and enjoyed the softness. He guided her, and she took the opportunity to follow his rhythm and learn from it. Adrian timidly explored her mouth with his tongue, as if he were knocking on a door to be let in. Sam was quite naive, but not stupid. She parted her lips slightly, and he kissed her with the same intensity as a strong summer storm. They both tasted the flavor of strawberries, which they had eaten earlier on the floor, and it seemed as if they were floating towards the clouds. Eagerly, Adrian held her close to his body. He moved his fingers to her breasts and massaged them tenderly. Unlike Karen's, they were just the right size for his hands and filled them without overflowing. and he slowly undid, one by one, the buttons of her shirt. Suddenly, he let go of her, breathing heavily, turned around and shouted at her. "What are we doing?" He looked at her as if she were responsible for their entanglement. She approached him and touched his back to calm him down, but he jumped as if she had sprayed him with acid. And he walked away as if she smelled of skunk urine. Sam's eyes sparkled with unshed tears, feeling as rejected as a squirrel that her companions threw out of the nest hidden among the branches of the coniferous tree, so that it could fend for itself on the hard ground where it had fallen. Because, what had she done so wrong for Adrian to act like a wounded beast? It was true that she had never tasted the lips of a boy or made love, but there was always a first time for everything. Why couldn't he be patient with her and teach her how to kiss properly? "Do you realize that I just committed a crime?" He looked at her furiously, as if a judge on the other side of the door were banging the gavel to sentence him and send him to prison. "You're only 15 years old, you cannot give consent, and I'm already an adult. Do you need to think about this nonsense right now?" His explanation sounded like a mere excuse. "It was just a kiss. It's not like we robbed a bank." He felt that he had let himself be carried away by male hormones. And then, since she had no experience and did not act very boldly, he regretted it. "Well, this nonsense is what I study at Berkeley Law School," he retorted harshly for the first time. "You see, I don't even have the excuse not knowing the rules." "You hit the nail on the head. Excuse." Sam made an ironic face as she analyzed him. "It's obvious that you didn't like the kiss and wanted to end it. You could have just left it at that without all the drama. Think what you want." He ran his hand through his hair as he always did when he got angry. In response, Sam turned around, left the room, and slammed the door so hard that it made the door frame and the glass rattle. Moreover, when she got home, Aunt Kitty's radar immediately detected that there was trouble on the horizon. She got out of her what had happened while she held back her tears and bit the lips that Adrian had kissed so skillfully a short while before. Now they were burning and twice their usual size. She trusted her aunt and shared her thoughts, her fears, and her shattered illusions, the words flowing as uncontrollably as water from a spring. "I'm glad Adrian behaved in such a mature way." She nodded her head up and down like the bobbleheads that decorate car dashboards. "It's clear that I was never wrong about him, and it wasn't a mistake to let you spend so much time alone at his house. And don't worry, my love, they'll fix it and continue being friends. Think that after this, there will be more disappointments with other boys, so little by little you'll put this experience in perspective, and it will just be one more failure among many." What a consolation. Aunt Kitty tried to comfort her. She meant well, no doubt, but she had no idea how to deal with a girl who was agonizing over a broken heart. She found it hard to accept that in one fell swoop, she had lost her romantic illusions and her soulmate. After a while, she called Sally, another friend, and asked if she could come over because she didn't have the strength to go all the way to her house. Once the young woman arrived, Sam vented her feelings. The tears did not wash away the sadness that overwhelmed her because of the way Adrian had treated her. But having someone of her own age listen to her with understanding helped ease some of the pain. "Don't worry, honey." She hugged her as they sat on Aunt Kitty's hideous violet sofa, decorated with red roses. "Let it go. Boys are foolish. Adrian doesn't realize that you are unique, sweet, and the best. It's obvious that he likes you and cares about you, but he doesn't get it. Give him time. Or forget about men and focus on your own gender. You know very well that I like you, and I wouldn't act like that idiot. Don't say anything. I know you're straight. but if you ever switch sides, whistle at me." And Sam gave Adrian the time he needed and stopped showing up at his house. She got used to the idea that they lived in different hemispheres of the planet, until he visited her, apologized, and begged her to resume their friendship. They nicknamed their fling as the incident, although they agreed that any references should be kept to a minimum and only as a red flag if they fell back into silly glances or inappropriate touches. 2 days later, Adrian started dating the busty woman who was 5 years older than him. And because of this intruder, they were only friends. They were together, but not like Sam would have liked. She heard a car horn, and then the screech of tires on the pavement, the sound of metal breaking, and more urgent honking. Suddenly, she saw a car plow into the sign she had been leaning against, and this commotion abruptly interrupted her melancholic memories. Because she was thrown into the air amid thoughts of her unrequited love for Adrian and fell on the grass like a broken doll. The last thing she saw, before she fainted, was a pair of worried, honey-colored eyes that stood out on the most handsome male face she had ever seen. It was framed by brown hair with golden highlights from the sun's rays. He had it cut close to the temples in a comb-over style, rising slightly to the left. "He looks like a prince without his armor," she thought, fascinated. And then she fainted, just like the heroines in the classic novels she loved to read.